In this video, I will be sharing with you my top 5 tarot spreads for when I'm looking for some insight on a particular situation or just some energies to sit with and contemplate for a given period of time. And I'll go ahead and make it a tag just in case anyone wants to jump in and share their top 5 tarot spreads. Let's do it. I've really been on a bit of a spreads kick, kind of since the middle of winter when I did my midwinter reading video. I've just kind of been diving in to spreads, both spreads that I've been using since I've started reading cards and new spreads and variations on spreads that I come across and have never seen before, or just creating my own for any given situation or period of time that I'm looking to get some insight on or contemplate. Just for clarification, even though the tag is titled Top 5 Tarot Spreads, you can absolutely use Oracle or Lenormand or playing cards or Kipper or Dusty or whatever else you use in the realm of card divination. I actually intend on bringing in a bit of Oracle just as kind of a supplement or variation on a spread that I might do on any given day. Feel free to use what you have and what you like. Now we will go to my reading board for a top-down view, and I will be doing a voiceover for what you see on the screen. Here we go. Okay, my intention for laying this out is starting with the sort of simpler spreads and then graduating into the more complex spreads. So essentially the smaller spreads to the larger spreads as far as number of cards are concerned. I'll also be sure to include situations where I might be inclined to use one of these spreads over another. We'll start with a very simple and I feel highly underrated 2-card spread with variations. And one of my favorite decks to use for 2-card spreads is the Light Seers, simply because I feel it is a very good communicator and it speaks very clearly. This deck for me is very conversational, and it's almost like having just a talk with a friend if you were to go to them for advice. The first variation I'm going to show you is what I call the if-then spread. And I like to do this somewhat intentionally by selecting my if card from the deck. My if card being if I want to insert intention here, if I want to embody a certain behavior, if I want to engage in a certain activity, if I want to experience this kind of energy, if whatever the case may be, I will pull my if card, select it intentionally from the deck. So for example, if I ask the question, if I want to embody the behavior of a receptive communicator, a receptive listener, a receptive speaker, I would deliberately, for me personally, choose the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is water of air. So there's that nurturing emotional element within the realm of air, the intellect and thinking and speaking. The Queen of Swords for me is very much my receptive listener card. It's the embodiment of that receptive listening and speaking. The Queen of Swords and the King of Swords in particular, as far as the court cards go in this deck, I like very much. So this is my if card, and I select that intentionally. So if I want to embody the behavior of a receptive listener, then I will pull a card at random from the deck. And that will essentially tell me what I might want to consider doing, sort of a next step. So the if is my Queen of Swords, because that is the intentional energy that I am wanting to focus on. And I could do this multiple times with the same if card. I could leave my if card, the Queen of Swords, there, and I could pull multiple different then cards just to get different perspectives on that particular embodiment of that energy. So I might draw one then card, then maybe journal about it or just sit with it, and then I might put that back in the deck and draw a completely different card and journal with that and sit with it. So it's a really great way to keep a focus on a singular energy while getting multiple variations. For this then card, I drew the Nine of Cups. Nines in the tarot for me are about attainment, accumulation, fulfillment. They're kind of the peak of their energy. It's kind of the high point before the transition and sort of the come down of the 10. So in the context of the Queen of Swords being my if card, if I want to embody the behavior of a receptive communicator and I get the Nine of Cups for the then card, if this is the energy I want to embody, then perhaps I should put my attention on emotional or relational fulfillment. If I'm speaking with another person, maybe I can ask them what makes them emotionally fulfilled. What is it in their life that makes them feel at their peak emotionally? And this could be sort of in a light or a shadow, because not all heightened emotion is good. You know, there's always that other side of things. And so this would just be putting attention on that peak emotional experience, whether that is positive or negative. This is a really simple spread I like to use when I'm wanting to be really intentional with my practice, but also wanting to keep a bit of an air of mystery at the same time. It's a good compromise between the two. So that's my quick if-then spread. The other two card variation that I often like to use is what I call the yin-yang spread. It's just two cards, one representing the yin, one representing the yang, with the yin being on the left and the yang being on the right. I tend to use this spread if I'm feeling a need for some kind of balance, if I'm sensing there's a bit of polarity or sort of opposing energies. I will often do this quick yin-yang spread just to kind of get a sense of something I might want to pull in for the yin side and something I might want to push out for the yang side. The yin is very much about receiving. The yang is very much about acting or giving. Another good position name for this would be receive and give, if you want to look at it through that lens. But I really like this one. I'm just feeling a need to be centered, and I look at the two sort of opposing energies. I've mentioned before in several other videos that I often like to look at the bottom card with tarot, but with two card spreads, I often don't, just because I like to keep it simple and just look at the two sides through whatever lens I have chosen. So here I'm going to flip over the yin card, and here I have the devil. So the devil can be sort of a tricky energy to work with because there's often an automatic association that the devil is bad, and there are, of course, negative connotations to the devil, but like any other card, there can also be positive connotations. All of these readings are completely hypothetical and not, my intention is that they are not for me or anyone in particular. But with the devil in the yin position, the devil for me is often about abdicating power or taking power back. So there might be this need to pull your personal power back toward you. And if I were to get this in this position for me personally, I might consider possibly doing some kind of cord cutting visualization or ritual or something to that extent, just to kind of maybe shift that energy. And in the yang position, something to push out, The Eight of Coins or Pentacles is here. Eights for me are about advancement, sort of going forward. Eights are my leveling up cards. They're about maturity and ripening. And in the case of Pentacles, that's about resources in the physical and material world. Eights for me also can be about sustained effort. So there might be a need to push out or to give some effort regarding one's physical world. This can also be about the body. Coins and Pentacles for me, they're physical, so and the body is included with that. So maybe leveling up one's diet or movement routine might help bring that feeling of balance back. Here, what I'm doing is bringing in an oracle deck, this one being the Soul Trees Oracle. I sometimes like to do the yin yang spread with what I call an anchor card, just a card with a key word that represents a theme or a focus or an intention. And here we have the Wisdom card. So if we look at the yin, or receive and give is good for this one as too. So if we do receive and give, for the receive, on the left we have the 10 of Wands, and on the right we have Justice. So the 10 of Wands, 10s for me are about transition. They are moving on to the next cycle, and it's about putting down what is no longer working for you in whatever area of your life that is. In the case of Wands, that's maybe actions and tasks and vital energy. And in the receive position, this is telling me maybe if I were doing this reading for someone else, I might say it's okay to receive help. Receiving help can be very wise. We can bring in that saying, work smarter, not harder, and by receiving help, sometimes we can make that happen. It doesn't have to be so difficult. We can delegate tasks and things that need to be done to other people, or maybe they can be rescheduled, or maybe just eliminated altogether. Sometimes we, as people, think we need to do a bunch of things that we really don't even need to do, because in the end they really don't matter. So that might be important to kind of take a look at that. And in the case of Justice in the give position, Justice for me is often about fairness and truth, particularly internalized individual truth. By taking those steps to making things easier for yourself, you can give your truth about what matters to others. You can put that out there maybe to inspire others. So that was another just really quick and unrefined example of when I might use a 2-card spread. Now we'll move into variations on the 3-card spread. It really cannot be denied that 3-card spreads are powerful and effective, and the possibilities of combinations are pretty much limitless. One of the decks I like to use most for 3-card tarot readings is the Darkness of Light Tarot. I've found through my experience that these cards in particular speak very well for 3-card readings. 3-card readings are so completely versatile. They give enough detail to where you can feel satisfied with a reading, but they're not so complex that you feel overwhelmed. One of the classic 3-card readings for really any given topic or situation is some kind of past, present, future reading. And what I often like to do is I'll shuffle the deck. I'll divide it into 3 piles like I would normally, but instead of gathering the piles back up like I normally do, I leave the piles where they are, and I will draw the top card from each pile to represent a card from the past or context, the present or current situation, and coming up or the future possibility of the situation. I often like to flip the present card over first just because it represents the right now, and I very much often like to keep my tarot readings present and right now focused. And in the present, we have the Five of Cups. So whatever this situation is, there's some kind of emotional chaos or flux. Fives can be very chaotic. They can also be adventurous and flexible. It just depends on the situation and the context. And in the past of this situation, there was a tower moment, which might explain the emotional chaos. And depending on how one proceeds through this energy, a possible outcome is the Eight of Swords. Eights, again, are about that leveling up. So there's a leveling up in one's mindset, or not, depending on which way the ball bounces. And sometimes if I want to get some advice or an undercurrent, I will pull the bottom card of the present pile, just like I did here. And here we have the Four of Swords. Four of Swords is my card of meditation. And this is telling me that this situation, whatever it is, there's emotional chaos as a result of a tower moment, and depending on how we move through it, we could level up mentally or not. And meditation could possibly help with that. So that's a down and dirty kind of past, present, future reading. Another variation on the 3 card that I like to use is a spread that often appears in sort of beginner tarot books or beginner websites, just because it's relatively accessible, which is the situation, action, outcome. But I have a bit of a spin on it. I tend to do situation, action, and advice, just because I like having that next step. And sometimes I will do a situation, action, outcome with the bottom card being the advice, but oftentimes I just like this 3 card with situation, action, and advice. And here I'll give an example. I'll flip over the situation card, and the situation, we get the Page of Cups. So as I've said before, court cards for me are about behavior. This could be the behavior of another person or the querent, whomever that might be. Page of Cups for me gives form to an emotion. It's the earth of water. There's also an element of vulnerability here. So this situation, if I were to interpret this, would be that there is a need to be a bit vulnerable, and that might be, or someone is being vulnerable and it might be maybe backfiring. In the action position, we have the Wheel of Fortune, and whenever I get the wheel, it's always an aspect for me of divine timing, and there's often a bit of waiting here. So, and it's also a call for me to be observant in one's environment and sort of be on the lookout for those signs or omens or cledons. And then in the third position, in the advice position, there is the Nine of Swords. So for me, as the advice card, Nine of Swords, my advice, I would interpret the advice here as do not overthink. Again, nines for me are about accumulation and attainment. And in the case of swords, it's mental. And mental accumulation can be a good thing, but it can also be a negative thing if it is in excess and it's causing you anxiety. And here in the wheel card, we see the figure is blindfolded. So this is very much about just feeling and sensing when the time is right to maybe be a little more vulnerable, and don't overthink it. There's like there are no wands here, but I'm very much feeling there's an element of instinct present here and knowing when to act. Now we'll get into a spread that is sort of my own creation. I call it my elemental timeline spread, and in this spread I use 2 different decks. One for the timeline and one for the elemental aspect. I really like using this spread when I want to look at a specific period of time, for example, a month or a season or however long a period of time I designate. And I tend to like to work in groups of 3s when I look at time. So whatever the time span is that I choose, I will divide that time up into thirds. I actually did a video back in winter that I sort of based around this spread, which was my Navigating Grief reading for Pisces season. I use this spread. I'll link that because it's a bit more in depth. Firstly, I will lay the the timeline cards down. And if I'm looking at it, for example, over the course of a month, I will divide the month into thirds: early month, mid-month, and late month. And for this example, I am using the Tarot of the Abyss by Anatori, and it's become a bit of a special tarot to me over the past few months. So I will shuffle, I will cut the deck in thirds, I will gather the piles up, and then I will just pick from the top. So first card represents early month, middle card mid-month, last card late month. So this is an energetic timeline for me. I can address each card separately and just look at them in isolation, and or combine them together to kind of weave a story or a flow of energy over a period of time. Here I'm using the Arcana Tarot playing cards, the Dark Edition by Dead on Paper. I like to, for the elemental positions, I like to use a pip deck just because it's clean and simple, and because one element can cover several different areas, it leaves more room for sort of broadening that interpretation. So again, I will shuffle this deck, cut it into thirds, gather the piles up, always starting from the middle, then going to the left to the right, and I will lay the elemental positions. The top position for me is represents north and earth. Next position represents air and east, then fire and south, and then water and west. So here we have 3 and 4 for a total of 7 cards. For me, this spread is a great compromise between looking at a period of time and specifics within the course of one's life through the elemental positions. So starting with the timeline, I'll flip over early month, and here we get the world. So there may be a deeper sense or need to complete something, see something to the end, and transition and begin a new cycle. So for this hypothetical querent, there might be that need for completion. And then for mid-month, there's the 5 of Cups again. So we have this sort of emotional flux or chaos, maybe potentially as a result of something coming to an end. Somebody might be navigating some difficulty in dealing with and moving through their sort of emotional landscape in mid-month. And then moving on to late month, we have the 6 of Wands. The 6 of Wands for me is very much a card about being set up for success. Sixes for me are about alignment and harmony and a very deep sense of balance. And Wands, of course, are action. So once this energy gets moved through toward the end of the month, the querent could be in a position to be set up for success if the emotions are processed in a productive manner. So that's just kind of a quick example about how I might go about reading this energetic timeline. And since there is a major at early month, that is a period of time that I might focus a bit more deeply on just maybe some reflection or being observant as to what's going on outside of myself, because majors for me are kind of macrocosmic. They reflect the bigger picture. So now we'll go to the elemental aspect. And for Earth, we have the 4 of Swords. 4 of Swords came up previously, I think. So there's this energy of mental foundation and stability within the realm of Earth. So the body, work, money, time, resources. So that's flavoring that element. So it might be beneficial to do a little meditation or just get the mind calm when it comes to resources. If you're overstretched on time, maybe take a breather and do some meditation. So east and air, we get the sun. The sun for me is about health, vitality. It's a peak of well-being, so to speak. And it's a major, so it's a deeper, if there's this deeper sense of that, or there might be something going on in one's environment that influences this sense of health and vitality. And it's in the realm of air. This might be being in a really good position mentally, mentally you're feeling perhaps very healthy, which could be as a result maybe of doing some of that meditation up there in the earth position. And in the south position, there's the wheel again. So because so many cards are showing up that are repeaters, if anybody watching this feels like there's something in this for them, feel free to take it, because that's often how I feel when I do things like this, is if there are repeaters, maybe there's something in it for someone. So in the position of south and fire, we have the wheel. So again, the wheel for me is the sense of divine timing. It's change. It's inevitable change. And what matters is how you ride the wheel, so to speak, of change. And it's in the realm of fire. So actions, this is also passion projects. Then in the realm of water and west, we have a very watery card, which is the hangman. And the hangman is about waiting and perspective. And it's another major. So 3 out of the 4 elemental positions are majors. And so the elemental positions would be something I might pay more attention to. The hangman can also be about surrender, so perhaps there is a need to surrender to your emotions, and that might assist the navigation of moving through that chaos or flux that is the 5. So just feeling your feelings and allowing that in the end could be beneficial for your well-being. Looking at this as a whole, there are elements of flux and chaos, but there's also some really positive things, particularly with that Sun card and that 6 of Wands. So it's sort of a balance of waiting and being patient and coming out on the other side, hopefully better off than you were before. Every once in a while when I do this spread, I will also bring in a keyword oracle deck. And for just a quick example, I'll bring in the Soul Trees Oracle again. And I will draw an anchor card just like I did for the 2 card spread. So in turn, what this will do is set the anchor, so to speak, for the reading by providing a theme, and then the tarot can be interpreted with that theme in mind. So for example, here with the celebration card, I would have laid this first just to kind of get that theme in my awareness. And the tarot reading would have been built sort of around that theme of celebration. Something else I'll often bring in is an advice card. I do have a few decks that have cards that give just, simple, straightforward, practical advice. So for the sake of example here, I will use the Wisdom of Hafiz to draw an advice card, just something to kind of carry forward. And it's often interesting how these advice cards will relate to the tarot. For example, here I immediately notice the presence of that sun on this advice card, which is Dream Wide Awake. And not only is there a sun on that card, but the number of that card is 19, and the sun is the 19th major arcana. So that's a big connection for me, and I would take a look at the sun card in its respective element in relation to the advice of dreaming wide awake. Those little tie-ins for me can really add so much meaningful nuance to a reading. So this is my elemental timeline spread for when I just want to look at a period of time with a little addition of some detail within particular areas of life. Now we'll move into one of my favorite semi-larger spreads, and it's actually my preferred spread over the Celtic Cross, and that is the 7+1 Horseshoe. And one of my favorite decks to use for this spread and for other larger spreads is the Encore Tarot by Ciro Marchetti. I like using this deck for larger spreads because the cards are bordered in different colors for their respective suits. And in a larger spread, what this does is make it visually easy to make connections and see patterns and sort of determine what areas are connected by the same suit. But I like the different color borders because for me, it's just a very quick and easy visual cue to see where those patterns emerge. So for this spread, I will shuffle and cut the deck in thirds like I normally do, and then typically draw from the top. The main part of the horseshoe consists of 7 cards, and I like to do my horseshoe with the open at the top versus the bottom. And I will lay the card, my position 1 card is often what position 4 is in other versions of this spread. And I like to look at this card first because this represents the querent and their self, their attitude, their perspective on the situation. I think it's really important to look at that first. To the left of that first card, there's a past, present, future regarding the situation. To the right of the querent card, cards 5, 6, and 7, the card immediately to the right of the querent is the environment card. So what is kind of going on around the querent, so, and that could be places or people. The next card up is a challenge that they might face. And then the last card, the 7th card, is a potential outcome. And I do use a potential outcome card here because the +1 card that I often use in this spread, which is the bottom card at the bottom of the deck, that will be advice. I do like to have a potential outcome to look at in this spread just because there is a process here. There's a process of looking at the situation where the querent is situated in relation to that, and then how the situation is moved through. So as I said before, I will flip over that bottom card. That's my position 1 because it represents the querent and the attitudes and perceptions of the querent right now. And in this case, it's the 9 of coins. The Knight of Coins is what I call my slow burner card. It's the fire of earth. So there is an intensity with the fire, but there's also a deliberate and intentional, methodical energy with earth. So in this case, the querent could be embodying that energy of moving forward, but moving forward slowly. This energy takes its time. Now we'll take a look at the situation and turn over the past card or the context or the background card. And in this case, it's the 10 of Wands. So at some time in the past of this situation, there was a feeling perhaps of heaviness, maybe needing to put some things down, figuring out what worked and what didn't in order to move on to the next cycle of action. And in the present, we have strength. So perhaps in the present of the situation, there is a need for that, a deep need and sense of control, needing to sort of tame the beast, so to speak. And in the future of the situation, the trajectory, we have the 10 of Swords, another 10. So we have the 10 of Wands and the 10 of Swords. So 10s for me are transitory, and in the case of Swords, it's mental. So the future, the trajectory of this situation, there's a need for a transition of mindset. Moving on to moving through the situation, in the environment card, we have the 9 of Coins. So 9s for me, again, are about attainment, sort of the peak of the suit. And this is an environment. So in the querent's environment, there are opportunities for physical resource material attainment, and maybe it's just a matter of the querent being aware of those people or those situations or opportunities in their environment. Next, we'll go to the potential challenge that the querent might face. And in this case, we get the 3 of Swords. And this is somewhat of a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. And the 3 of Swords for me is not the heartbreak card. That's more of the 5 of Cups. 3 of Swords for me, 3s are about expansion, expression, creativity. It's Empress energy trickle down into the suits. And in the case of swords, it's mindset. And sometimes when I see a Rider-Waite-Smith base 3 of swords, I often think of words that wound, or how your words, thoughts, and communication is affecting others. So that's a potential challenge to be aware of. And in the case of the potential outcome, there is the 2 of coins. So 2, another coins card. So lots of earth present in this reading. So 2s can be for me about planning, gestation, preparation, stuff sort of simmering or bubbling below the surface, but they can also be about balance because there's 2 of something. So the potential outcome, if this energy is moved through in a productive way, could be that there's a balance of resources, and the querent could have what they need to move forward in a way that is conducive and productive to the situation at hand. So noticing patterns here, the only major we have so far is strength, and it's in the present of the situation. So there might be a deeper issue in the present circumstances of the situation to look at. We also have 2 tens, and we have a lot of earth going on in the reading. So there is that pattern that one could potentially examine. For the advice card, I'll turn to, once again, the bottom of the deck, and this is my +1. So we have the Page of Wands. So another court card. So advice for this querent might be to not be afraid to embody that beginner mindset. In this case of Wands, a beginner mindset in something that excites and inspires them. Again, pages give form to the ace for me. So this is giving form to the suit of wands, to fire, of passion, of creativity. Just approach something with fresh eyes and an embodiment of curiosity. But keep it rooted in the physical, because pages for me are the earth of their suit. So the 7+1 Horseshoe is one of my absolute favorite spreads for when I want information on a particular issue or situation, and I don't want to do something like a Celtic cross. I find this just as effective and can give just as meaningful of a message, but with fewer cards. And last but certainly not least, we come to the 12+1 Zodiac spread, also known as the horoscope spread. This is one of my favorite larger spreads for when I just want to do a general reading. I don't really have anything specific in mind, but I just want to pull some cards and get an assessment of how energies are flowing. The way this spread is laid out is it starts toward the left middle and goes in a sort of an oval shape around the board, kind of how it follows the astrological wheel. So the first card I'm laying out there is the first house, then second house, third house, fourth house, and then fifth house, sixth house, seventh, eighth house, ninth house, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I am using the Arcana Tarot playing cards light edition for this. These smaller cards are great for these larger spreads. And each house represents a specific aspect of one's life. So this is a really great energetic snapshot. So in this example, for the first house of self, we get the star. There's a major arcana in the house of self. That for me is a big deal in my experience when I've done this reading. In the second house of resources, we have the 2 of hearts, or 2 of cups. That's nice. Third house of communication, the ace of coins. That's also very nice. A potential beginning there in the third house. Fourth house of home is the 2 of wands, 2 of clubs. Fifth house of creativity and children, we have justice, another major. So houses where the majors fall, I tend to look at those first. So we have the first house and the fifth house. Next, in the sixth house of home, work, routine, we have the Queen of Coins. That's a lovely card to get in that position, in my opinion and in my experience. Seventh house of intimate relationships, Wheel of Fortune. This is interesting to have two majors in the first and the seventh house. And if you are someone like me who has their sun in the seventh house, if there are two majors in each one of those, I find that interesting to look at just because your seventh house is your sun sign's also your descendant. In the eighth house of other people's resources, we have the Three of Swords. In the ninth house of long distance travel and education, we have the King of Coins. That's a potentially really nice card there, depending on the person in question. 10th house, career, reputation, work. The Nine of Wands. There might be a bit of a heaviness there, depending on the situation and who's reading. 11th house of networking, acquaintances, Three of Clubs or Wands. And in the 12th house of the what I call the subconscious, sometimes it's called the house of undoing, is the Eight of Cups. That's a great card, in my opinion, to have there in sort of that 12th house energy. So this is another spread where it's really easy to look at patterns, especially if you use a deck like this where the majors are kind of different in design. You can look at number patterns. For example, we have a couple of threes, we have a couple of twos, we have the king and queen of coins. So that can be something interesting to look at, maybe if that is a set of two individuals that are connected in one way. One's in the sixth house, one is in the ninth house. And then of course the two majors in the first house and the seventh house. If this were a reading for me personally, I would really spend some time with that just because of where my sun is at in my natal chart. My sun is in my seventh house. And then in the fifth house of creativity, there is justice, which is another major. So that those three houses are ones that I would look at a little more deeply. And then I might look at that ace a little more closely just because it is a potential new beginning. And then examine the rest kind of in turn, just depending on where I felt my attention was being drawn to at the time. And then the +1 does come in because I will flip over the bottom card kind of as an undercurrent. It could be advice depending on if I want to get a little bit more specific and how I want to connect the cards together. In this case, we have the Ten of Hearts or Cups, and I immediately feel drawn to go and look at that 12th house, the Eight of Cups in the 12th house, and figure out, maybe dig a little bit deeper as to what's going on there, because tens for me, again, are transitory, and this is keeping what works, putting down what doesn't emotionally, transitioning into a new emotional or relationship cycle. So this could be, again, another prompting to go and look at that first and seventh house, again, particularly because the Wheel of Fortune is there, and, there's some divine timing aspect there for me. So this was just a really quick and very undetailed example of how I would do a zodiac spread. I love this spread. Like I said, I love it for general readings. You can get more specific should you want to. You could even pull more cards from a different deck as clarifiers. You could bring in Oracle easily to this spread. There's a lot that you can do with it. And this is a really great spread to look at over time. Like, I've left this out on my board or a table for weeks at a time. And every once in a while I would just peek at it and see how things were unfolding. And it can be very, very, very telling. And this is a great spread to do journaling with as well. So those are my top 5 tarot spreads, at least for the moment, that I like to use on a pretty regular basis. Feel free to jump in with your top 5 should you feel called to do so, and be sure to tag me so I can see them, because like I said, I'm on a spreads kick and I am always looking for new ways to play with spreads. That's all I have for this video. Until my next one, take care and be well.